I'm here with the best in the business. It's senior NBA insider Adrian Wojnarowski. And Woj, free agency, it really is in full swing. It's almost time for all of us to hop on a plane, head to Las Vegas for Summer League. But the basketball world is still on Kevin Durant watch. So where does his trade request stand as of right now, this moment today?
Hey, Malika, listen, Brooklyn continues to talk to teams around the league and, try to see, in a lot of scenarios, if there are multiple team deals they could put together to get back the assets that they would want for Kevin Durant, which are immense. You saw, I think, part of the baseline set with the Rudy Gobert trade, essentially 5 first-round picks, and that would only be, I think, part of the return Brooklyn would want. They want high-level players, perhaps an all-star, and then more players. They think this should look like one of the biggest trade returns in league history because there's never been quite a player like Kevin Durant on the market. And I think as executives get to Vegas this week, a lot are going to arrive in town Thursday, Friday, ahead of the weekend. I think there's an expectation that GMs and team presidents getting in front of each other, Sean Marks being able to visit face-to-face with other GMs, I think that could be helpful in putting deals together.
Well, given that price tag, that asking request is going to be so high, that it is so immense, is there a path here, Woj, where we could see Kevin Durant return to Brooklyn?
Absolutely, especially, Malika, if this drags out and if there's not a deal found here in the next month and it goes into August and you get closer to training camp, Brooklyn, they don't have to take a deal that they don't want to do. They don't have to talk themselves into a deal. But then at the same time, I think Kevin Durant, as he looks at the situation, could he look at it differently over time? That's certainly a possibility. And I think as you look, if you're Kevin Durant and you start to look at the teams that you might land at, and then what those teams might look like after they have to unload so many assets, I think that's why there's no rush in this process. And I think perhaps there'll be a time where there's better communication going on between Brooklyn and Kevin Durant, and maybe that could impact the idea of him returning. But I don't think anybody's counting on it. And I think all sides are, proceeding as though, listen, that Kevin Durant will be traded at some point. But because of the years left on his contract, 4 years on his contract, and the fact that this is the off season, things can change, they can evolve, there's no question. Maybe at some point the Nets come to Kevin Durant with a trade and say, hey, here's something we're about to do. And he looks at it and says, maybe I'd rather stay here. Now, he doesn't have say. Brooklyn could go forward with it. I just think, Malika, there are a lot of scenarios where certainly Kevin Durant gets moved, but yes, where he could stay because people do change their minds. They change course. And the fact is, he's under contract, and they still have a very talented, pretty talented deep team in Brooklyn that when you look at it up against other teams in the league should be, with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving playing at a high level, should believe they can play with anybody.
Well, one of those players that is on that team as we stand here in this moment is Kyrie Irving. He opted into that roughly $37 million player option just a couple of weeks ago. How does he factor into how Kevin Durant is weighing his trade request here?
Yeah, and I think that's another consideration Brooklyn has to make about whether it's a positive or negative to move Kyrie Irving either before Kevin Durant or after Kevin Durant. The market is certainly very different for Kyrie Irving, and the Nets have talked with the Lakers, and I believe there's been, back and forth in communication. And, you look at where there's cap space right now. A team like San Antonio could be a facilitator right now in a let's say a Russell Westbrook, Kyrie Irving deal between the teams. They have the cap space. Now you would have to incentivize them at a pretty high level. And I think that's, I think the willingness of the Lakers to incentivize a deal with multiple draft picks, I think that's still, part of the reason, that's a deal that hasn't gone anywhere yet. That can always change. Again, Rob Pelinka, Sean Marks in Vegas this week and moving forward. I'm sure they'll have conversations there. But I do think that's part of the equation for Brooklyn do they handle the Kevin Durant deal first and then revisit this? And I think the Lakers' motivation, they've looked at other deals. They've continued, I know, to check in on Eric Gordon in Houston. That's certainly a player that interests them. Buddy Hield in Indiana. Different kinds of guards, shooting guards, certainly both of those players, former Rob Pelinka clients, right? Hield, Eric Gordon. So the Lakers are looking out at different scenarios out in the marketplace, but there's no question Kyrie Irving is one of them.
So you mentioned the Lakers, so let's shift to the West if we could here, because DeAndre Ayton's restricted free agency, it appears to be one of the key offseason dominoes that's yet to fall. So what can you tell us about where the Suns stand on Ayton right now?
And Malika, the Kevin Durant talks have probably slowed up. In fact, I'm confident they've slowed up, I think, some of the marketplace for DeAndre Ayton, because teams who would look at sign-in trades, Ayton would impact their ability to do a Durant deal. Teams with salary cap space, who right now could throw an offer sheet or do a sign-in trade with Phoenix. Let's say teams like Indiana, Utah, San Antonio, and all teams, certainly a young center fits into their timeline and their sort of organizational need. But certainly Phoenix knows, listen, I think the worst case scenario for Phoenix is DeAndre Ayton signs a max offer sheet somewhere, and they've got to make a decision on matching it. If they match it and keep him, maybe they trade him, which they can't do for a year. But I think in those scenarios, I think for the Suns, it's talk, sign, and trade with teams who have cap space that can threaten to sign them to a sheet, like Indiana, who's getting up there in terms of their ability to throw down a max sheet at DeAndre Ayton, or teams who don't have cap room, who just want to do a sign and trade, and that way Phoenix would get back assets for them. But Phoenix all along has been reluctant to max out DeAndre Ayton. The expectation is he will still find one at some point here in the marketplace. But the Kevin Durant talks, I think, have complicated the timing of DeAndre Ayton, but I think that will pick up again here in the coming days.
So for now, we wait and we head to Las Vegas. Adrian Wojnarowski, thank you so much for your time and for your reporting. So a whole
day, mga ka-basketball hoops, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and don't forget to tap the notification bell button for the real-time updates. Thank you!